Good evening, good evening. Welcome to our live Facebook. Thank you for coming, and do let me know where are you listening from. Really appreciate for those of you who are coming. Thank you, Nora, as usual, one of our regular and great supporter. I really thank you for coming tonight in here, and also to others who are just new. And tonight we'll be talking about a topic which actually ongoing right now. As you can see, the US also already open at 9:30 as we are digesting a lot of the input of the CPI figure, which I'll probably talk at the end of this show. Thank you for coming again tonight. We will be talking about a topic, so we will start shortly. And if you have any question with regards to the overall market in here, do pencil those in the comment. I'll be happy to raise them. But definitely tonight is a topic that many people were really asking, especially those of you who are investing in the longer term, especially in the stock market, as a way to build wealth rather than trading in and out. This is definitely a topic to be reckoned. The end of the US dollar and what it meant, especially if you are in the stock market having some portfolio of either from the US or the KLSE. It is really going to be matter tonight in here. So thank you for sharing. Thank you again for a good night, for a very good evening to to all of you in here. And tonight is definitely one of those topics that you've been seeing in the headlines, especially in the US side, where many people are talking about, is the US losing its economic status, and where is it, really leading into? So a lot has been said about this market so far, but let's take a look at where we are, and definitely until the strong part of this market is whether we can really get ahead of the issue like inflation and so forth. So thank you for sharing tonight. So let me just do a bit of sharing on my side too, and then we will get on to the regular programs that many of you may have the kind of question that you want to ask. So we definitely get on to that too. All right, let's get on to the topic for tonight. And tonight the sharing is going to be introduction to the discussion of the end of the US dollar. So I do hope that by the end of this evening, those of you who have some issue about this thing, people are talking about it, I think it's overblown, and also looking into the history, how did US dollar get so big and became the world reserve currency. So we're going to be looking a bit on the history too, because once you understand the history, then you understand why things happen for what it is. Because a lot of time, many things that we look at is merely just a repeat of what happened in the past, and from then onwards, more importantly, as an investor, as a trader, I ask myself, can I take advantages of what's happening in here? I always tell people, you can look at the news, listen to here and there, but if you're not going to able to take advantages, and then what's the whole point of really doing what you are doing? So this is the most important part, is the economic outcome of knowing this information in here. And of course, there are also other countries is trying to dethrone the king US dollar, which we all know are in here right now. The Chinese yuan or the renminbi has been a way discussion in there. And what will be the future without the king US dollar? And more importantly, the market impact to the stock market, and what should you do with this information in here? Then we'll do off a closing and a summary from here. That will be the sharing for tonight in here. Now, of course, in the past week, many of you may have seen this or heard this, is the talk of the town, the end of an era. US dollar loses its status as a world dominant currency. A new order has arises, and the Chinese yuan will challenge the US dollar hegemony. All right, that is the dominant status in here. And what is the decline of the US dollar means to the global economy? But let me give you a small clue. The decline of the US dollar already started not just in 2023 after the war, after the CPI. It actually has started some time ago. It's just that maybe this is another season where they bring back the fashionable miniskirt like they did many times ago, and in many ways it is very similar to, it's just a fashion statement, a fashion that they use in the economic terms that we have in here. So no surprises if you are a historian of the stock market, then you will probably notice This is something that is not new, but the question is, will it lead to a market crash with this new information in here? And of course, every time things will change for what it is, so we always have to take recognizance of the matter in hand and see what that really matters. Okay, of course, there is also very famous author and also marketing guru like Robert Kiyosaki, which is a big proponent of the cryptocurrency and the gold. And this is what he always sells in his website and all he talks. Of course, he would not give anything other than that. There was even a talk. He said that gold is better than Tesla, and gold is better than Apple share in here. Again, it is anyone's opinion in here. He may be right, but he may be wrong. So at the end of the day, is what you think is correct in here, right? And for those people who are in the cryptocurrency winter, I think the winter has come, the winter has sort of passed and spring is here. You can see cryptocurrency Bitcoin has moved past the 30,000 mark, and there's a lot of talk right now. It is heading for 1 million or at least 500,000 for that mark, but a bit too early. As I said before, once beaten, twice shy. If you are in the crypto environment in here, you will be very skeptical, which I was previously in here. I still remain to be skeptical, as there are too many tainted people in the space of the cryptocurrency. We've seen the FTX fallout and unregulated, and that seems to be that era that we are focusing in here. So of course, the rise of the new dominant pack, many of you may have heard this before, and we have Presidency Vladimir Putin, and this was the new guy been replaced, the Brazilian, and then we have Modi plus the South Africa president in here. They are part and parcel of the BRICS. I think many of you heard about, consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. They are the big dominant in here, but largely due to the big population and the economic power, which is almost close to about 30% of the global GDP growth and the size in here. So together as 5 of them, this is the new dominant pack in here versus the Western or the Europe and US, okay, the US versus the rest of the world, and this is the other group who want to play, maybe on the other side. If you're not interested in the Western philosophy, maybe you'll be interested on the BRICS philosophy in here, which is an alternative way to play it. So in many ways, these countries, the Brazil, the Russian, the India, China and South Africa will tend to support themselves. So if you look at here, between them, they recorded almost 8.6 trillion in merchandise, which is up almost 33%. That's why it's gaining a lot of traction, as we can see in here. And it's at a share of the global economy, almost 23%, and a global investment of 25%. It is up and coming, I would say. This is like the up and coming badminton player lah. So they are coming up and they want to dethrone. And previously, when I was in badminton, there was Lin Dan, then you have Lee Chong-wei. Now those are gone. Now you have the Japanese guy, Momo, right? I think so too. I'm not a follower of the badminton fan in here. And you could see that is actually also happening in the world currency stage that we have here. So the BRICS are in. At the same time, when President Biden came in and after the COVID, there were a strain between the Crown Prince of the Saudi, MBS, known as, I can't remember, there's a short name that used MBS, and the strained relation between the President Biden in here. So that allows the Saudi Crown Prince to cozy up more friendly channel with the Russians, because both of them have a common goal, which is the energy, right? And you all know Biden is big on the climate change, and anything got to do with climate change, which means use less energy, use less oil. So that's something that the Saudis, and as well as the Russian, one of the second or even third largest producer of crude oil in the world, and also gas, which has been selling a lot to the Europeans. And this is also the spark of the Russian-Ukraine conflict that we've seen about a year ago. So they've been cozying up in there, and there were already suggestions between them to actually use the just accepting, not really yet. So this is where Saudi Arabia were talks with the China after China had came in and pacified between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Remember, Iran and Saudi Arabia has been all the while been enemies, and China came in, took the role previously that was done by US as the middleman, and managed to give a peace, a pact between Saudi Arabia as well as and Iran in the things. And also Iran is also part of the so-called second order of the world. If you're not in the West, then you'll probably be in the second order in here. And there are talks between Beijing and Riyadh about accelerating the Saudi unhappiness grow with the Washington of only accepting not yet really moving into the oil sales in here. So right now the US is still accepted when the Chinese buy the oil from the Saudis, because the consumption of the oil as well as keeping strategic reserve for the Chinese is a lot. So the key word here is accepting, not really yet. Now let's take a look into the US dollar. When it first started off, was first printed in 1940 when the Federal Reserve Bank, which is what we are talking tonight with the interest rate raise. So during that time you have the First World War. Now we're going to go into a little bit of history, right? Okay, so a lot of the allies, including France and UK and US, they all paid everything in gold because before the 1940, right, gold was the standard for doing a lot of the trades in here, and US become the largest holder of gold in here, and also their technology are more well sound. And at that time, before the 1920s, British pound was one of the reserve currency that were used. So many people after the Second World War as well as the First World War, they actually pegged their currency after the war. Okay, so this is a thing in here. So before the war, which is the Second World War, everything was really pegged to the gold standard. Means how much a currency is, it's actually pegged to the gold standard. So in that way, we avoided people do not overprint their money in here. And also at the same time, going forward, the IMF reported almost 60% of the all foreign banks reserve are denominated in US dollar. Because of this strong US dollar that they have in all the reserve bank, many times they felt a bit safe in here, but at the same time they also feel that inflation has been exported from US to their own country, this country who hold the US reserve in here. No doubt US is not one of the strongest world currencies. As a matter of fact, it actually ranked number 10 in terms of the strongest. But because it had a good history, started just after the First World War and continued to the Second World War, where a lot of the the currency that were used were pegged to gold, and such that US dollar were also pegged to gold, and it became standard, and that's why everybody accepted that after the Second World War. And then came the World War II. We all know World War II was a very devastating war, something that we have seen right now through our eyes in internet, in CNN, and all the news media, is the Russian and Ukraine war. So you all know that when war comes, we use a lot of the reserve, right? We use a lot of the reserve in here. So many so they were so used to using US dollar, right? Prior to the 1944 Bretton Woods. I'm going to introduce another term called the Bretton Woods. So what has said that, look, they run out of the gold reserve because they've been using a lot of gold to buy, pay for war machine, pay salary, pay everybody. So all the gold has been sort of been used up. In such a way, they don't have any more gold reserve. So that way, they say that since US dollar is one of the strongest partner among the British and the British and the France, as well as Germany at that time, they decided to peg to US dollar. All right, they pegged the US dollar, and one of the way they pegged the US dollar is 1 to 35 ounce. So 1 US dollar is pegged to gold is at 35 US dollar per ounce, which is way cheap. But right now, if you look at it, 1 ounce is almost 2,000 US dollar in here. You can see how much inflation had exported in there. So those were just after the end of the First World War to the Second World War. People switch from gold standard to the US dollar because they will figure out, since US dollar is already pegged to the US to the gold standard, to the gold in here, which is at 35 US dollar to 1 ounce. So must well use US dollar lah. That way better, right? Because you cannot carry the gold around so heavy, isn't it? So at that, it became the world reserve currency. At the moment in 1944, just after the war, where central bank will process the reserve currency and they'll keep the gold in here. As long as you use US dollar, it is 35 US dollar to an ounce in here, and that continued to do the kind of trading that happened up until 1971. All right, so right now we are talking about 1971. So in 1971, we all know what happened, right? 1969 was Vietnam War. Then there was another war, which is the Vietnam War. US went in and fight the communists in here, just like the Russian and Ukraine war. So that's why they talk about whenever there's a war going, especially a long-going war, there is always a change of guard, change of guard where a certain very strong so-called dominant country like US will be dethroned, and a replacement will come in. So because we have the British just up to Second World War, then after Second World War, the Americans became one of the world dominant in here. Remember, the British, that time Malaysia also under the British ruling. 1957 we got independent in here, then the American came in. So after the America, again, they say who is the next guy will become world dominant. So this question has been said since back in the year 2000 when China joined WTO, World Trade Organization, in 2005. So they said that China will likely be the next the great dragon, the next generation dragon, and that's been saying that. So is this move that we see right now, what I've shared with you, the BRICS country getting in and turning the Saudis to accept Chinese yuan, as well as also Anwar visited presidency about last 2 weeks. So they did talk about the Asian Monetary Fund, where accepting of yuan rather than US dollar as part and parcel to develop the countries that we see in Southeast Asia. So back to this story in here. As such, we've seen the Vietnam War caused US to spend a lot of money, and every time when you have war, a lot of money will be spent. So President Nixon was at that time, he said that since I want to print more money and I cannot have 35 US dollar to an ounce, I definitely have a lot more gold in here, but I will print more. So which means no longer it will be pegged to US dollar, so they can print more money, and that's where the term fiat currency comes. So you can see a lot of the oldies right, going back to 1971, people like Robert Kiyosaki, which still believe in a lot of the gold. And if you are born after 1971, you're probably wondering what the hell is a fiat currency. All I know is US dollar is getting stronger and stronger. I've never buy gold before. And so for all these oldies, people like Kiyosaki were born in the 60s, including myself, born in the 60s, they always prefer gold, because gold, you cannot print gold. Gold is limited in here. Once you mine all the gold, you cannot do it anymore. Whereas US dollar, you can print and print and print, and that's why that's what happened to the loss of the currency, loss of the purchasing power that we used to have. And I remember last time your property, my property that we have, right, used to be cost not too expensive, but now this next generation, especially our children in here, they cannot afford to buy a property if you're below 25 years old. And that's why the so-called printing of the money, and we're going to talk more later on the slide what this thing happens. So I hope that so far I break it down for you. The fiat currency enabled to print more, and that has led to gold has been unlinked from the US dollar. So no longer US will peg 35 US dollar to an ounce, and right now it is free floating. If you last checked the US dollar, 1 ounce is almost close to 2,000 US dollars. So just imagine those were only in 1971. All right, 1971. No, 1913, 1944 was when they pegged the US dollar to the ounce, but since then they unpack it in 1971. So there goes the purchasing power and why we see what we have. So US, as a result, US exported a lot of the inflation to many of these countries, as long as you use US dollar again. And this is one of the program we also the global financial crisis. Many we have seen in started in 2007, 2008 after the Beijing Olympics, right? That's where the financial crisis came. We have the QE1 stand for quantitative easing 1, then we have also quantitative easing 2, 2010 we also have the twist, then the QE3 and the QE4, and it ended in 2004. At that time, the Federal Reserve has printed almost 4.5 trillion, the whole QE program going back as far back as about 6 years, right? So that's a lot of money being printed. So as more money being printed, you can see the purchasing power of you and me really getting less. Remember, a cup of coffee, even before the Russian-Ukraine war, will cost about maybe 6-7 ringgit. But now if you drink a cup of coffee, I mean the important one, it will cost you more than 12 ringgit in here. And that's what happened whenever you have this kind of inflation coming in. We all know also the Russian and Ukraine war has caused also the supply of fertilizer, supply of food and grain, and that causes up a lot, especially those of you who are celebrating this coming Hari Raya in here. So you can see from here, the dollar purchasing power has dropped. So the date that you want to pay attention is 1971. All right, 1971, you can see the 1944 was a year where the US dollar, 1944 was a year where US became the currency, world reserve currency in here. That was around $14 in here. That is the cup of coffee, right? Yeah, a cup of coffee that is worth, you can see here is the reserve currency. So this is a purchasing power has really dropped in here. So this is an example, right? 30 bars of chocolate way back is worth $26 in here. Now one cup of coffee is right now in year 2020 is worth $1 in here. So the same dollar of that cup of coffee, let me just move aside, you can see here, right, is worth $26. Okay, so that same cup of coffee at that time, $1 can buy $26 right today. That's the kind of power that has been losing in here, right? So you all notice that inflation, you need to use more money to buy the same amount of money in here, and quantitative easing has actually certainly accelerated this in here. We all know money is getting smaller. Now remember, the chicken prices after June is going to go up again. Why? Because they're going to be floating the chicken prices, the chicken meat prices, and also the chicken egg prices, because all this while has been a control item. So this will probably be the last control prices of chicken that you will enjoy for the Hari Raya. Come June, no more. Even your KFC is going to go up, your McDonald's chicken is going to go up, and the kari chicken and the rendang all is going to go up because of the unpegging or the control prices. Government cannot tahan anymore because things are going up in here. Now if you look at the BRICS, the US dollar and the BRICS in here, how much of the control that they have today. If you look back at the world leading currency in here, you could see the US dollar and Europe are the big dominant in there, right? But compared to the BRICS currency going back to 2019, certainly this amount has gone up. You can see it's only a small percentage, about 1.7, 4.3%, India 1.7, 1.1, Brazil 1.1. So you can add it up. It's even less than 10% of what the US dollar in here. So you might be figuring, how is that BRICS is going to come back and take more market share in terms of the world reserve currency? Well, what do you think? What are the things they are doing? Definitely they are doing it right now. You can see China and Russia, China and also in China and India, they're not good friends. They've always been fighting. India and Russia are good friends. They are part of the BRICS, so that we're looking into settling anything other than the US dollar in here. So this is actually what is happening in here, and you could see why the Chinese and the Indian rupee are trying to get more market share, because the world reserve is all dominated by the US dollar in here. So if you are enjoying so far the information that I'm sharing with you, give me a thumbs up in here, so I do know that the information that is presented in here are world class in here. Now the US dollar economy dominance from 1971 after the Vietnam War, remember we talked about the Vietnam War, it has become a major playing field in here. In terms of world trade, it's almost 12%, global GDP 25%, cross-border loans, a lot of the loans, even Malaysia, right? Remember Tenaga does, a lot of the loans are actually pegged in US dollar. So you can see, right, even a lot of our business that we buy, Inari, Hatta Lega, Kosan Top Glove, they sell their rubber glove in US dollar, isn't it? So having a US dollar has always been great, and this is why a lot of the loans are also in US dollar. In the SWIFT payment was about 42% are done in US dollar, and this was one of things that the American did to stop the Russian and kick them out from the SWIFT, right? So when you kick out reserve, you cannot pay for anything. So how do you buy things, right? So they have to settle. They cannot settle in US dollar. So all the reserve will be locked or been frozen in here, so they have to use the Russian ruble, which is fairly not open in here. And that's why this Russian-Ukraine war, as it continued to go on, more and more of this switching, especially the Russians, from the ruble to Chinese yuan, to enable them to buy day-to-day items like wheat, flour, other metals, electronics. Those are the things that they really needed in here, right? So if you look at the numbers that we have in here, so you just can't replace US dollar overnight. It will take some time. Remember, if I talk back at the history, 1944 to 1971, that is almost 50 years. Well, if you put it in 50 years, 1971, 50 years, 2023, they may see some significance, but right now US dollar is still very strong dominant. I'm not saying in my lifetime that US will lose its world reserve currency, or maybe will be a dual reserve currency. We have two existing ones. Just like, if you some countries, if you go to previously, if you go to Laos or Cambodia, you can use US dollar or use the Cambodian cat or something like that. I can't remember the name currency of that one. So a lot of the time you'll be seeing that in here. So now the main question is what do we use of this information, Martin? You've been talking a lot about the history of the US reserve currency. So will a weaker US dollar make a weaker stock market? That's the question we are going to ask, right? So definitely if you look at it, right, it goes both ways, and it's a case-by-case basis, depending the flavor or the century of the month and what are we facing. Now, if you look at the weak US dollar, a weak US dollar actually means cheaper US products, as long as the world want US products. And in many ways, we want a US product, but it's made in China, isn't it? The Apple product, what else? The phones, okay, some of the technology in the phones. No doubt, some of these phones are made in China that I have here, but the electronics are made in US. Okay, so that's again pointing to a US. So weaker US dollar may point to a cheaper US dollar, higher revenue, giving it a strong stock market. All right, that's definitely one reason. At the same time, if you have weak US dollar, it will also hurt some of the US companies earning. All right, so because now US dollar is so cheap, you have to sell more of it, so they don't get the kind of earnings, right? Then they may give a weak stock market, which is not a very strong argument, having said that. And then the third one, it's a bit more tangent for it. A weak US dollar led to higher inflation, right? This is where the loss of the purchasing power, which we talk about in here. So US dollar weak means you need to have more money, need to have more US money. Remember I showed you the chart, the coffee and the McDonald's, right? $1 $1 coffee right now is worth $26 way back in 1942 in here. So that's what we talk about, the loss of the purchasing power. So that way you need to have more US dollar to buy things, and of course people don't have a lot of money, right? So mean weaker spending, EPS down, weaker stock market. But that's not the case, right, which we're seeing right now in US, which have a highest inflation, which is caused by the Russian-Ukraine war, and also the COVID shutdown and lockdown, which actually led to inflation because too many products, right? So too many money chasing too few products, and we also have a stronger US dollar. So that's not always the case that a weaker US dollar makes a weaker stock market. All right, so keep that in mind. Now, if you look at here, this is the US dollar index. Okay, the US dollar index versus a currency, a basket of currency, could be euro, could be Japanese yen, could be yuan, could be the British pound, and this plops up this green line DXY. Dollar index. Dollar index. Okay, so you can see dollar index going back to 1978. This is available on TradingView, and no matter where you go, the stock market still goes up. First thing you'll notice, right, like it or not, there will be a correction, which I always talk about in the stock market, right? And every time, and you can see the shaded green color here, these are the recession. Okay, these are the recession. So normally when they announce the recession, right, the market will shoot up. And you see, once they announced the recession started, market shoot up. It's always the case like this, right? So recession is always kind of late, and you can see from here, this was the earlier part where the US dollar became very strong, but stock market still goes up. All right, so you can see here, so there is no strong correlation where a weaker US dollar, and when it hit here at $1.60, yeah, and then start falling back to below 100, this causes the market to collapse. As a matter of fact, the stock market still continue to go up. In the 80s, they call it the 80s boom, right? So it's not always the case. It's not a strong argument, but then you go back to 2008, where we have the global financial crisis. When the stock market collapsed, the US dollar actually fall too. So that was more of US dollar happening. And we also have this occasion here in the dot-com crash, where we have the market also fell. Year 2000 dot-com crash in here. The US eventually, after a year plus, started to fall off too. So not necessarily the case. Now, if you compare right now to the ringgit, now ringgit, we come into ringgit in here. In Malaysia, we are ringgit. We all know which color is the ringgit, right? Can anyone tell me which color is the ringgit up here? Remember, during Mahathir time, we pegged to 3.8 here. This is the purple color. You see, at one time, Malaysia was very strong. Our ringgit around 2.5, 2.6, right? Then the global financial crisis came, isn't it, right? 1998, right? Then there were a lot of speculative, something that also happened in Shanghai, led to a lot of margin financing, right? And then the currency just shot up, just bloody mismanagement. And we went up to 4.5 here 4.5, right? That was the last time we saw in 2000. Then Mahathir came in and have capital control. So after capital control, we pegged at 3.8. All right. So finally, I think 2006 or 2007, we unpacked, and then the market fall back much better, going back to 3. This is where the capital control came in and actually rescue our country, you can say that way. But then going back to 2013, where Najib came in, all right, Najib, and continue to do spending, about the Najib, right, with the 1MDB, right? So there were a lot of leakages, right? As a result of these leakages, let me just bring up the the currency weakened until 4.4, 4.5, and 2008. The Pakatan Harapan came in and started to manage in here. So it's pretty much only like 15 or 18 months. And then we have a change of government, switching back to the Barisan Nasional in here. And then the more recent one, we hit to 4.6, 4.7 when we started to have the Russian-Ukraine war, and also the raising of the interest rate, we hit 4.6. So you can see from here onwards, the something has to happen for Malaysia to get stronger ringgit. Definitely the administration will have to work very hard. Having said that, what we are seeing right now, the current Pakatan, and also we have to have a bit of luck too, a little bit of luck. And right now, by switching to the Chinese yuan, will it really help our ringgit? Because pretty much ringgit is pegged to our Chinese yuan in here. So against the US dollar, it's still a question mark. Now remember, right, so if we peg ourselves to the Chinese yuan, which is why we are getting more Chinese yuan, it may not necessarily be a good thing for Malaysia, right? Definitely, if a stronger US dollar would hurt us, but then we get more business and more economic inflow, creating more jobs. Short term, I think is good, but in the longer term, may not be necessarily a good thing. But again, more and more people accepting the Chinese yuan, we eventually will forces Chinese yuan to float, because right now I will talk about later about Chinese yuan being managed very tightly, okay, which is the next slide that you see. So all in all, you can see the stock market continue to go up. That's the US dollar, right, the yellow one. The ringgit, we can see the 3.8 pegging, and then you have the S&P 500. So it's really explained going back to almost 30 or 40 years in here. The US stock market continued to be very dominant. As I said before, the innovation, the earnings and the revenue were to go, and you'll fetch much better in here to give you an overall perspective. So now if you talk about gold, let's talk about gold too, with inflation in here. Now when it comes to gold, Warren Buffett always said that investing gold is stupid. This is something that he talked about in 1998, but unfortunately he has to eat his own words with recently over, if you peg it back to year 2000, gold has actually outperformed the S&P 500 by almost 500%. And more recent, after the COVID and after the Ukraine-Russian war, all right, this has actually caused gold to outperform the S&P 500 due to the what's happening here, the dollarization, which means people are trying to get away from the US dollar in here because US is printing so much money, it's exporting a lot of inflation in here, and also the war and also the high inflation, right? So gold has done pretty well. So as I said before earlier on, those people who have got some gold around in here, you would have protected your money, protected the wealth. Check out my TikTok channel too, where I talk a little bit about gold too. So I have a new channel on TikTok for those education. Now coming back to what we have seen, Anwar recent trip, which is only last week, I think 6 or 7 days ago. He was met up with the presidency. It was a very welcoming, and I felt very proud, to see a Malaysian shake hand with the presidency in here. So there was a lot of talk about the Asian Monetary Fund in here, where talking about replacing the US dollar. So if they want to do any business with China, usually they talk about US dollar. They say, hey, since we're all friend, right, can we talk in Chinese yuan? Not. And that's this whole idea. And because many countries are talking about it, very quickly that news, the headline that you saw early on, that say US dollar is losing its status in here, and that's why people are looking into other reserve. But keep in mind right now, most country also keep other reserves, not only US dollar. They will keep some in Chinese yuan, they'll keep some in euro, depending on the trading partner, which they do. So this is just part of diversifying, not to put all your eggs into one basket, right? I'm sure you also do that with your portfolio in here. So, but the issue has always been, which is Chinese has been manipulating their currency in here. Now remember, US dollar being a world reserve currency. When there's always world reserve currency, there's always what we call a overvalue, right? Because it's like a premium. If a world reserve means your premium, people want your money, they're willing to pay more, and that's why you are overpriced in here, right? So one thing you will notice on the next slide, I'll talk about the Chinese yuan. When they first joined the WTO in 2005, then this is where they started to grow their country. Almost got 800 million people out from poverty in here, and that's really a good model with it. But they have to go through the currency. So one of the things that Chinese did was to keep the Chinese yuan relatively stable, and that's what we also did, right? Remember the global financial crisis in 1998, where market came in and pegged at 3.8, and that's what usually do economists. So at the same time, Chinese devalue its yuan to make it as its product to be very attractive and cheap. So the question is, right now, Chinese PBOC, the PBOC is Bank of China, okay, still manipulate and control this currency. So that's why in the Trump administration, the President Trump was very hard with the presidencies, labeling them as currency manipulator. Yeah, People's Bank of China, PBOC, that's right, People Banks of China, India. So the question is, if Chinese yuan or China yuan become a world reserve currency, it has to float its currency. It cannot peg like what it's doing right now in here. So the question is, how can you do that when you're unwilling to peg? Because at the same time, Chinese is trying to grow, right? We know China has a growth issue right now, and that's why IMF came in and talked about this issue, that they need to grow. So there is also another reason I particularly think why all these things are brought up. Now, if you look at the Chinese yuan, this is the Chinese yuan. Yes, the Chinese US dollar to Chinese yuan versus the stock market. So you can see here, it joined the WTO in 2005. Here it was the 2005 in here. That's where Chinese started to depeg, because previously they were like above 8 Chinese yuan to 1 US dollar, right? And that was pretty much they were pretty weak in that sense. So they have to make it a bit weaker. Okay, they have to make it a bit weaker. So previously they were like 2 Chinese yuan to 1 US dollar. Then they make it into as the economy gets better, they're making it more and more what we call undervalued until a point of 8. But when they started WTO, right? Then the WTO stated in here you need to get your currency in order. So that way they started to depeg, which means they switched to a flexible control mechanism, keeping it to around 7 to 6.5 yuan to a US dollar. This is what we have been seeing right now. That was in 2005. And you can see whether the yuan switch or depeg. You can see also S&P 500 also jalan, right? So this is where we talk about, whether the Chinese do anything to the yuan, the US stock market was still jalan one, regardless of it. So then you go back to, so it actually worked favorably for the Chinese to have a lower currency, well, when they are selling products to others, right? So that's where, if you have it too expensive, around 3 Chinese yuan to 1 US dollar, then people may not pay for it. And one of the reasons why you can see Chinese been so successful is because they undervalue the thing. And the same thing goes for Malaysia. Malaysia would never try to have a very strong ringgit, because that way many of our products will become more expensive, especially we are competing with Thailand, Cambodia and so forth. So we need to have a very good balance, not too high and not too strong, because if it's too weak, that we are paying like 5 ringgit to a US dollar, then a lot of people will work hard. When you go overseas, you can see your money almost devalue in here, right? So that's also important. Now this is a slide that talks about the Chinese yuan intentionally let the currency weaken past is 6.5 or 7 and try to manage is 4 in here, because they are an export oriented economy. So with the export oriented, it's always best to have an undervalued currency. And the same goes for Malaysia, right? Like it or not, our government like to have it around 4.5, then it makes our export cheaper when we can sell more too. But at the same time, if you look at the rest of the world, US dominance are very, very strong in here. You can look at America, of course, all US dollars. And you look at Asia Pacific, almost 77% in here. And look at Europe, it's all euro. And look at the rest of the world, it's all US dollars. So it's very hard to change people's mind. Now, why now? The question is, why now people start talking about that US is losing its title as a world currency? Now, we started back in 2008. We know that Venezuela and US tak ngam ngam lah. They always fight one Venezuela, right? Remember, right? So they said that it will price all in euro, yuan and ruble. You can want to buy. Then 2011, right? China shifting away from US dollar in favor of Chinese yuan, and China started buying oil in gold-backed yuan. Right, in 2022, which is just recently, last year Saudi talked to China about trading, so it is still talking, right, about this, and because of the Russian-Ukraine war, the Russians are not able to do any of his business in ruble, right? So that way they wanted to have another shot in it, so they are talking about anything other than the US dollar. And then January 23, the finance minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed Al Jada, opened to trade a currency other than US dollar. This is the first time in 48 years. Okay, first time in 48, but they already started talking sometime back in March 2022. So this is ongoing because you have a new crown prince, right? Because previously was King Saudi. I think King Saudi was the old king, but he passed away. So the new one, the crown prince, so he want to change the tables of negotiation with the West. And that's why we have this, so for the 48 years, right? So if you look at the timeline in here, it not only started back in 2000, and the first time we start talking in 2018 from the Wikipedia, but it goes back to 2004. Well, they start talking about disappearing dollar in here, going back to 2004. Then you have the 2007, another time again, they talk about the panic of the dollar. Then in 2009, Brazil and China start talking about trading in yuan instead of US dollar. China, Brazil signed their agreement to trade in local currencies in here, right? So, and then going back to 1975, they will already start talking about OPEC want to cut link for a dollar. So it's the first time, as I said before, 48 years, but previously 1974, they already talk about this already. And the dollar seems to be losing its global reserve status 2011, and then another one 2018. So as you can see, many of this didn't fall through. But the fact is, the US dollar used to have very strong high dominance of the world reserve currency are getting less and less and less. We will talk about those figures. But Why this is brought up, and my personal belief, is because China has a growth issue. Now, I think this year presidency unveiled that first time the GDP of China will actually grow below 5%. Right, want to go at 5%. So if you have an issue of growing, but remember China also have 1.8 billion people, so that's a lot of mouth to feed. So if you can't grow that fast and you have so many mouth to feed, at the same time you need to earn money. So how is it? So you need to sell more Chinese goods, right? In that way, selling Chinese yuan to others. Now if you look at it, traditionally being Chinese, being a developing country, we got to talk about household consumption. US has one of the highest consumption anyway. They consume, they buy a lot of things in US, right? So you can see that. But when it comes to China, they save a lot. So when a country doesn't save, when a country save a lot and doesn't consume, how is it going to get the money? It has to export out, right? That's why China remain to be the factory of the world, because it's need to grow. So need to grow, you need to sell Chinese product. In many ways, that is selling the Chinese yuan, all right? But sometimes a lot of the trade are done in US dollar in here. So because of that, the household pattern has seen to be 34%. So which means Chinese people in China, right, don't really buy a lot of things. Of course, you may see some of the Chinese buy a lot of the luxury item, right? But if you look at the overall China, the 1.8, 1.9 billion, many of them don't buy a lot of things, because as per consumption of household is only 34%. Now, if you look at it, prior to the entrance of WTO 2005, right, when they entered the WTO, they became world dominant in terms of producing the world factory, right? All your goods comes in, and that's why you saw GDP growth really go up. Then we have the global financial crisis, the market tumble a bit more, then it pick up. But since 2015, you can see the growth has steadily come down. Then the COVID, we have first time it fall below, and then it did climb back up, but since then it is trading below 5%. For the first time, it's actually trading below 5% in here. And so this is the real concern in here. At the same time, China also want to decouple from the world economy, because it's relying a lot on the chips, all the semiconductors in here, and US and the Western country are trying to restrict that, but at the same time it needs to grow. But partly it's also, I believe, one of the bad decisions that was made by President Xi in here. It locked down the entire country for 3 years, right? And COVID-19 basically just accelerated this whole degradation of the growth that you see so far, right? So this is why Chinese is really slowing down, as you see in here. Now, if you look at the Shanghai Stock Index, again, the little gray area here is the US recession in here. We have a nice boom starting from 2005. We all know 2005, where China was admitted to WTO. That's why we see this big move in here. And also Beijing Olympics were held in 2008. Finally just showed that China has arrived. So a lot of time country want to tell the world that we already arrived, means we were a emerging country to becoming a developing country. We will have to hold some sort of game. Malaysia did do once, remember? Commonwealth Games, 1998, the one we partially arrived lah. Alright, partially arrived. So I hope that you give you a good economic of world sector, what happening. Then, of course, any boom came the easy credit, you have a market crash. All right, we have a market crash. Then also 2015, almost about 7 or 8 years later, we have another market bubble. That is also due to a lot of margin trading allowed, right? Remember, we had that one in 1998, right? For Malaysia, the Asian financial crisis, our market also zoom straight up because of margin. So China had that experience, and then the market crash. And since then, right, we have another crash. There was a takeoff in the US tech sectors, which they did do that. You can see from here, right? After the global financial crisis in here, 2009. This is shaded area here. This one is this one is COVID. 2009 is here. This is COVID, 2020. After the COVID, the market actually come back. But then President Xi came out with the tech crackdown. Remember Alibaba, where Alibaba chairman Jack Ma went and make a lot of statement with the Ant Group, and that was the beginning of the fall of the tech group, and then the market tumbled down. So a lot of this, if you look at it, is all due to the so-called secret mismanagement of CCP, loss of hindsight a bit in here, and also the restriction that was placed by the Western and the Europe that forces where China is. So right now China has this issue which is ongoing, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So if you look at the Chinese Shanghai index, which is the SSE composite index, which is the red one, versus the S&P 500. US S&P 500 has done much better if we're going back to 2024 to 2020. They had the WTO to prove itself, where the stock market shoots up and then finally came back down. So all in all, you can see the way how I will talk about US, somehow the economy in here are tied to their stock market. Okay, US economic are tied to the stock market. When they grow, the whole thing is just to push the American politician to make a lot of money in the stock market, because the wealth of the US Congress, the wealth of the politicians are tied to the stock market, which is the S&P 500, SPX. Whereas in China, most of the politicians in this case and the Communist Party, they are already wealthy. They don't invest. So you can see the two difference out there. You see what I mean? So you always want to put your money where the politicians are. Play the stock market and you follow the smart money, which always been the theme of what we talk about in here. Follow the smart money in here. So the issue is, now the truth is US dollar has lost its reserve. US reserve has lost to, used to be from 70+% in here, we can see back in 2000, right now in 2022 is below 60%, and will continue to go in a downward trend all in all. So that way the Chinese wanted to accelerate it is because of the slow growth that they had. They still need to export many of their products that they have, so they're trying to accelerate this thing in here. So you can see the issue is, but the big elephant in the glass house is this next issue, which is, what is it? The Chinese and the world will have to go through this. Will China invade Taiwan or not? That's the question. All right. So why this issue will pops up? Because the last 3 days we can see the president of Taiwan visited US, the House Speaker in California, and the Chinese decided to, sort of invade the side of the meridian line of Taiwan, right? So the question has always been, are they going to go into war to get Taiwan back by force? Now, one of the reasons why it's likely to be by 2025, because you have 2024 was the Taiwan election. They do hope that in the coming 2024, a friendly to China president will be elected. So they will probably wait to 2024. At the same time, you also see that the Chinese, the aging population, right? Chinese are having less and less baby because a lot of people complain. Foods are expensive, it's overpopulated. So it is an aging demographics and may not have enough soldiers to fight. Then there is also the China policy of unification. Remember, they took back Hong Kong, so they want to show that, hey, we can also take back Taiwan, right? And they also want access to the Taiwan chips, the Taiwan semiconductors, because without the semiconductors to their aircraft, they will be hindered. At the same time, the US are building all the US military bases in South China to stop Chinese from going out. We've seen that in Philippines. We've seen that also in the Pacific Ocean, where China are trying to build a lot of bases in here. So this issue will continue to pop up as we talk a bit in here. I'll probably give you more update should we get into some sort of early signal. I'll let you guys know too. So the question has always been, a lot of information out there, right? I think after you've gone through what I've just said there, a lot of information overflow, isn't it? Correct, right? But it's not information overflow, it's the ability to filter out, as I said before. Now, very important, you turn this filter to sharpen your filter and let our educationers, the things that you listen to turn yourself into having an opportunity in here. Now, remember last week we talked about how to position for reversal, right? Now, we've seen earlier on using the Pentagon Guider, how to identify the market bottom. And that was on the, remember what sector? Rubber glove, isn't it? So this week, we're going to talk about the rubber glove at the distribution likely. And last week still started to run in here, right? It has turned green pentagon already. So I'm just going to update you on the rubber glove. You can see when we run our filter, we're able to pick up rubber glove much earlier in here. So you can see from here, this was last Wednesday. Top glove all started to move up. It take up the UT. I'm sure some of you are going to be asking, can buy now? Now, if you look at it, shortly you're going to be looking at many Ds are actually turning to be on the weakness side, sign of weakness. So do be careful in here. So it's very important for you to enter at the green pentagon, right? And as the market goes higher, you want to be taking profit. So why I say that last Wednesday, see, you need to sell into a rally because we have 17 bars on it. All right, there is a sign of weakness in here. So you can always play the trading game. Now, let me just bring up the trading view here. Okay, I want to show you, here is the trading view. And right now, tonight, of course, with the 5.66 figures, Dow Jones is pushing up, right, to new, is it pushing up the new high? Not yet, the new high is 34,000, but the NASDAQ pull back a bit here, okay? NASDAQ is looking for one more interest rate hike, which is a 25 basis point at 5.66. Because if it's anything at 5.2, they will pause interest rate, then you'll see this fella jalan already. So right now, we see this market pull back a bit. So we were talking about top glove. Okay, sorry about that. Just sidetrack a bit. So if you look at top glove, right, this was where the market is. So you can see from here, right, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So right now, market pull back a bit. So just ngam only, you know, to be getting out. So you can see from here, when you first turn green pentagon to here, which is 18 bars. Okay, already run 18 bars a day. Okay, so time to take some profit. The remaining you can let it run. Let's also take a look at Kosan. Okay, Kosan also green pentagon from here. All right, 20% in here. And you can notice last round where they had this nice run here before it turned red pentagon. Let's take a look at this. Here to here was 36 bars. So either this thing can run for 36 bars, right? Or we see some more weakness coming in. All right. So this is the prognosis in here. If you're going to be buying, look for good setup, continuation of trend buying, maybe at a pullback, have a tight stop, right? But the best time is always going to be green pentagon. All right. Just a quick update for those of you who have for rubber glove stocks. If you are trading the intraday, there may be some opportunity using the VSA 360 plugin to allow you to get in nicely here. All right. So you can use a smart Robie for some of the other stocks in here. So let's come on to the summary of the US market in here. And of course, those of you who have any question you want to ask, feel free. I'm here to answer them. And so US dollar is losing its currency. Still a long way to go. It is slowly itching off. Like I said before, you can see the market share of the world reserve currency. We used to be 70 plus, now it's gone to 60 plus in the span of 20 years. So maybe another 20 years it will lose in or accelerate, right? But more importantly, as a trader investor, I do see the history have shown the weaker currency, the weaker US market may not have much of an impact to the US market, right? As a matter of fact, we do notice the ringgit has the ringgit plus the Malaysia KLSE works differently from the US market in here. So that's why it's important to diversify away, if you have not done so, in our local stock market to a combination of local and US portfolio. And because this is less people doing it, all right, I think more people are not willing to do it, not because they don't have the skill, it's maybe just pure ignorance. So by hooking up to our channel, learning all about the fundamentals, the technicals, the economic, the macroeconomics things that we talk about here, I do believe you'll come out to be a good investor, especially a contrarian investor where it's less crowded in here. So that's all I have here. Martin Wong in here, signing off. Do follow us on our Facebook and Smart Robie, and also we are in TikTok right now. All right, go over to TikTok, trade_VSA. Now, of course, this is our Telegram channel for all our educational material in here. Do share that with your friend, and I'll be happy to take any question in here. I do hope that the last 50 minutes or so of information will give you an idea that where the market is likely to be heading and the impact of the US dollar or de-dollarization will have in the stock market. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on Friday on our breakfast show again in here. Bye bye and good night.